the universe you know is just one of many, and every so often, a crack opens and reality from another world bleeds through. What would you do if you saw yourself walking out the door while you were still sitting at your desk? A Reddit user named Triggerhappy Greg, which we'll talk about that later, worked night shifts at a small call center. One evening around 2 a.m., his coworker looked up and said, "Didn't you just leave?" Confused, Greg replied, "What are you talking about? I've been sitting here." The coworker swore she saw Greg walk past her office and out the front door. Same hoodie, same walk, same everything. They even checked the security camera, and sure enough, there was Greg walking out. But Greg had never left, and the security footage glitched right as he hit the parking lot. Erased, like someone never meant for him to be seen. Imagine someone who looks exactly like you, calling your dog by name and walking down your street like they live your life. A woman from Oregon shared a chilling story on a paranormal Facebook group. Her neighbor knocked on her door one evening, confused, and asked, "Why didn't you say hi earlier? I saw you walking Max." Only this woman had been inside all day. Max, her golden retriever, hadn't left the house. The neighbor was adamant, said she even waved and the woman waved back. Creeped out, she checked her doorbell cam and saw someone with her exact face walking Max past the house. But, conveniently, the footage froze just as the double turned to look at the camera. What if you called your own phone and someone answered? A man named Alex recounted this story about parallel universes. While looking for his missing phone, he used his partner's device to call it, and someone picked up. The voice on the other end said hello, but it was his voice. The same tone, same speech pattern. The voice said, "Don't come looking for me," and hung up. Later, Alex found his phone under the couch, completely dead. There was no missed calls, no records of an incoming call. It was as if whoever answered was using a different version of his phone. What if someone knocked at your door and you answered while you were still upstairs? This story comes from a Reddit user named Mirror Moments, who shared an experience from when she was a teenager. One afternoon, she was upstairs in her bedroom when her friend came over and rang the doorbell. Her mom wasn't home, so no one should have answered, but her friend said that someone did, and it was her. The other her opened the door, smiled, and said, "I'm busy, come back later," before shutting it quietly. The friend was so weirded out by the interaction that she texted her asking what was going on. That's when Mirror Moments ran downstairs in confusion, only to find the door still locked. Her friend was standing outside, pale and wide-eyed. She swore that it was her. The same hoodie, the same voice, the same smirk. It was her friend. She knows what her friend looks like. When they checked the security cam footage later, it glitched right at the time the door supposedly opened. No motion, no video, just static, almost like something or someone didn't want to be seen. Someone showed up at your house claiming to be you, and your family believed them. Redditor Pale Orange Sky posted that her younger sister swore she'd picked her up from school one day, drove her home, and even helped with her homework. The problem? Well, she was working a double shift that day. Her car was parked at her job, and she had proof. Time cards and surveillance. But her sister described the car perfectly, described her outfit, described conversations they'd supposedly had. Quote, "You told me to stay away from the old tree in the backyard," her sister said. Only she'd never said that before. Or at least, not in this universe. What's up with that old tree? I want to know why the parallel universe version was so concerned about the tree. Something mysterious. You get home and the door's unlocked. Someone's in the shower. It's you. A man named James from Missouri told his story to a paranormal podcast. He came home after a weekend trip and heard the water running. He assumed his roommate was home early, but when he opened the bathroom door, he froze. Why would he open the door when he thinks his roommate is in the shower? It's a creepy roommate. Anyways. The person in the shower had his tattoo, his build, his voice. They both screamed. The other James bolted through the back door and then vanished. When he told his roommate later, the roommate casually said, "Dude, I thought you were already here. I talked to you like an hour ago." What if one day everyone acted like you weren't you? In 2016, a woman named Marissa shared an incident in a thread about identity glitches. She walked into work and nobody recognized her. Her boss claimed they'd already spoken that morning. Her coffee was already at her desk. Someone had clocked in with her badge 20 minutes earlier. She checked the security footage and saw a woman who looked exactly like her, wearing the same clothes, walking into the office and doing everything that she normally did. The footage froze as the real Marissa walked in. Her double was never seen leaving. When your reflection moves before you do, run. A man in the UK posted on a lucid dreaming subreddit that he was brushing his teeth one morning when he noticed something was off. His reflection wasn't synced. It blinked a little too early, tilted its head before he did, and then it smiled. And he hadn't smiled. He turned around and ran out of the bathroom, nearly slipping. When he went back later, everything looked normal, except for one thing. The toothpaste cap was off, but he remembered screwing it back on. I guess the reflection didn't. Someone showed up at the DMV pretending to be you. Honestly, that's not so bad. They can wait in line for me. That's totally fine. In 2019, a man named Eric from Pennsylvania went to renew his passport and was told, "We already issued it yesterday." Confused, he checked, and sure enough, someone with his name, birth date, and even address had already picked it up. He asked for the security footage and saw someone who looked exactly like him, down to a scar on his cheek, but Eric had been at work, logged into his company computer at the time. He reported it, but authorities never found the imposter or the passport. That's like crazy to think that your parallel universe doppelganger could come here and steal your identity. Would it even be a crime? I mean, technically, they are you. Sorry, I'm just like really having a moment. Like, guys, let's think about that for a second. Would they be jailed if they caught them? Let's say, yeah, they caught them. Would they be jailed for trying to steal your identity, even though it technically is their identity too? I don't know. Let me know down below. What if you met your double and they acted like you were the intruder? One of the most disturbing stories comes from a woman in Australia who shared her experience on a podcast called Somewhere Else. While staying at an Airbnb, she swore she saw someone walking into the living room from the hallway. A woman with her exact face and clothes. They locked eyes. The other version of her whispered, "You're not supposed to be here," and then apparently just disappeared into thin air. She packed up and left that night. When she checked the Airbnb listing later, it had been removed. No record of the host, no record of her stay. Even her confirmation email was gone. Doppelganger stories aren't just eerie. They challenge everything we think we know about identity, time, and maybe even reality itself. Whether they're signs of a multiverse, glitches in our simulation, or something stranger entirely, one thing's for sure, these stories are more than just spooky coincidences. They're warnings.
When James Lanninger was just 2 years old, he started having violent nightmares about crashing in a plane. He'd wake up screaming about being stuck in a fire or yelling things like "airplane crash" and "the little man can't get out." During the day, he started naming aircraft parts most toddlers wouldn't know existed, things like drop tanks and Corsairs. He also kept saying he'd flown off a ship called the Natoma and that his name had been James. His parents eventually looked into it and discovered the USS Natoma Bay was a real World War II aircraft carrier. They found a pilot on its roster named James Huston Jr. who died in combat. The plane was shot down and exploded. James the toddler also named another pilot from that crew who was still alive at the time, and when they met, the child recognized him instantly. On top of that, James could recall specific events and details of battles that matched Navy records. His parents had never really talked to him about this stuff at home, and none of it was in any children's books. As he got older, the memories started to fade, but for a while, it seemed like this kid was actually remembering a past life. At 4 years old, Shanti Devi in India started insisting that she had another family in a different town. She told her parents she wasn't really their daughter, that her real name was Lugdi Devi, and she'd lived in Mathura, about 75 miles away. She said she died giving birth to a son and gave the full name of her husband, the town he lived in, what he looked like, and even the layout of their house. At first, everyone thought she was just making things up, but when they actually looked into it, her descriptions lined up. A man named Kedar Nath lived in Mathura, had a wife named Lugdi who died during childbirth, and had a son. When Shanti met him, She instantly recognized him and greeted him like she knew him. She also correctly pointed out places and people in towns she'd supposedly never seen. Word got around and the case became so well known that a commission was set up by order of Gandhi himself. They interviewed witnesses, retraced her claims, and found that almost everything she said had a real-world match. Cameron McCully was a regular kid growing up in Glasgow, until around age 5 when he started talking non-stop about a place called the Isle of Barra. He claimed he used to live there in a white house by the sea with a black and white dog and a family that he really missed. He talked about planes landing on the beach, his old dad named Shane Robertson, and how his old life had ended when he, quote, fell through. His parents had never even mentioned Barra before, but Cameron was convinced. Eventually they took him to the island, and it turned out there really was a white house by the sea, just like he described. But I mean, whatever, right? A white house, it's not like there aren't any other white houses in the world. Well, this one belonged to a Robertson family, again, just like young Cameron had described. Cameron was walking around like he'd been there before, naming things and pointing out details that lined up with what he'd talked about before. There were no obvious signs of how he could have known any of this. And his memories seemed emotional, not just factual. It didn't seem like he was just repeating stuff. It was as if he was genuinely grieving a life he'd left behind. In 1987, a little girl named Purnima Akanayak was born in Bakumana, Sri Lanka. She was like most kids, except for the fact that she kept talking about being crushed by a heap of iron. She'd also always tell her mother things like people who drive over others are bad, which is of course true, but it was odd that she seemed particularly focused on that specific thing, driving over someone. And when her mom got upset about a car accident that had happened one day, Purnima calmly told her not to worry because she had also died in a crash. She said a big vehicle hit her and she never made it to the hospital. Things got weirder when she started saying she used to make incense, and that her name had used to be Jinadasa. She also described 2 types of incense, how she made them, and how she used to walk around with her hands behind her back, supervising workers. She also claimed she lived across the river from a temple, which was over 140 miles away from her actual home. When her family finally took her there, she started pointing out familiar places and recognized people by name. And man she used to be, who'd died in a car accident, he was real. His name was Janadasa Pereira, and he died in 1985, 2 years before Purnima was born, when a bus ran him over while he was selling incense on his bike. And to top it off, she had a birthmark exactly where Pereira's chest had been crushed. Since childhood, Jenny Cockle would have recurring dreams of being a woman named Mary Sutton, who lived in Ireland, had several children, and died young in the 1930s. As she got older, Jenny became obsessed with finding out if Mary was real. She started piecing together what she remembered, names, locations, and the layout of Mary's old home. Eventually, she tracked down a town in Ireland that matched. She discovered that a woman named Mary Sutton had lived there and had died, leaving behind children. Jenny eventually reached out to them, now elderly, and met with them in person. And to their surprise, she knew all these intimate details about their lives, their personalities as kids, and even specific incidents from their childhood that had never been published or shared. One of the sons in particular became convinced that Jenny really was his mother reincarnated. He said she had the same mannerisms and emotional connection to them that Mary had. Emad Elawir was just under 2 years old when he started telling his parents about a life he had claimed to have lived in another village about 25 miles from where he was growing up, in Lebanon. He gave names, described a yellow car he used to own, and spoke about specific relatives, neighbors, and his former job. His family wasn't all that worried at first, but when Emad suddenly ran to a stranger on the street one day and hugged the man as if he recognized him, and it turned out this person was actually from the town Emad had claimed he'd lived in his past life, well, this intrigued his parents. Eventually, they contacted Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist who'd been studying cases of past life memories. Stevenson documented that Emad made 47 specific statements about his supposed past life. When Stevenson and the Elawir family visited the town, it turned out that 44 of those 47 statements matched up with the real-life story of a man named Ibrahim Boumsi, who died 5 years before Emad was born. Another important detail is that the child Emad would often talk about how thankful he was for being able to walk? Well, Ibrahim died around the age of 25 after spending a year in a sanatorium. He had tuberculosis and was confined to a bed during the final part of his life. Barau Carlin was a Swedish writer and poet. When she was just 2 years old, though, she started telling her parents that she was Anne Frank. Her family wasn't religious, and she hadn't been taught anything about the Holocaust yet, but Barau described details of Anne Frank's life that she shouldn't have known. What the secret annex looked like, how the rooms were arranged, and the names of the people who'd lived there. When her parents finally took her to Amsterdam at age 10, she led them straight to the building without a map or a guide. Once inside, she pointed out changes that had been made to the house since she had lived there. She also seemed terrified of men in uniforms, even if they were just policemen on the street. Barau went on to become a well-known writer and stood by her memories well into adulthood. She said she remembered parts of her death, the fear of being taken, and a sense of injustice that followed her for years. Tetsumus was born with a misshapen right ear, which his parents chalked up to a birth defect, but when he started talking, he claimed it was from being shot in the head in a past life. He'd said he'd been a man named Salim Fasli, a farmer from another village who'd been killed while working in his fields. He recognized people Salim had known, including his widow, and called her by name. He also gave names of Salim's kids and talked about private conversations and daily routines that no stranger would realistically know. Dr. Ian Stevenson, the same researcher who studied Emad Elawir, investigated Sami's case and found it pretty compelling. Salim had in fact been shot dead, and Sami's ear deformity was right where the bullet had entered. The way Sami talked about Salim's life was natural, like he was recalling memories instead of making things up. One of the eeriest parts was how Sami's personality was different from other kids in his village. He was more serious and cautious, traits Salim's family said matched the man that they had remembered. Chanai Chumale Wong was born in Thailand in 1967. When he was just 3 years old, he started saying he used to be a school teacher named Bua Kai. He claimed he'd been killed while riding his bicycle to work. His story got weirder when his family noticed he had two unusual birthmarks, one on the back of his head and another above his left eye. Well, Bukai was a real person who had died. And according to his autopsy report, the entry and exit wounds of the bullet that killed him matched up perfectly with Chennai's birthmarks. Chennai kept insisting he wanted to go home and would say the name of the village where he said he'd lived. Eventually, his grandma took him there, and without hesitation, he walked up to Bukai's old house. He correctly identified the man's parents and described items that had been in the home years earlier. He also remembered details like the name of Kai's bicycle and how he used to teach math. This case takes a turn from creepy to downright chilling. So a 3-year-old boy in Golan Heights, a region between Syria and Israel, started telling his family he'd been killed in a past life. He said he died when he was attacked with an axe and was buried in a nearby field. Elders in the community followed him to the spot, where they dug up a human skeleton with a wound in the skull, right where the boy said the axe had struck. Not only that, but the boy claimed to remember the name of his killer. When they confronted the man, he allegedly confessed. The whole thing was documented by Dr. Eli Lash, a respected physician known for his public health work. He said the boy's memories were disturbingly detailed, right down to the type of axe used.
What if every doodle you made was actually a window into your future self? Since age 7, Alex has been idly sketching the same man's face, beard, top knot, shaven sides throughout school and college. For 3 decades, the image remained just a doodle, nothing like his own reflection. Then, a year ago, Alex rediscovered his old notebooks and froze. The face in those drawings was now his face, down to every whisker and hairstyle detail. He'd never changed his look to match the sketches, nor had he consciously remembered drawing them, yet here they were, trapped in time. Was Alex unknowingly crafting a portrait of his future self, or did the universe slip him a glimpse from a parallel life where this was already reality? What if your next-door neighbor never existed, except in your memories? In autumn 2012, Columbus nurse Danielle Miller pulled into her driveway and saw a moving van parked next to her longtime neighbor's home. She waved and yelled hello, but no one answered. When she asked around, other neighbors were baffled. There had been no resident there for over 10 years, and county property records showed the lot vacant since 2001. Danielle even found official tax bills listing the address as unassigned, yet her smartphone photos captured the moving truck, the name on its side, and the familiar porch of the house she'd known since childhood. In a single night, the entire residence and the person she'd shared block parties with vanished from every public record. Picture stepping onto a train that, according to every schedule, shouldn't exist. In 1973, Boston commuter Mark Patterson regularly took the 7:45 p.m. line from South Station. One evening, bleary-eyed from working overtime, he boarded what he assumed was his usual train. 2 stops later, he glanced at the station sign and froze. It read Oldwick Junction, a station that shut down since the 1940s. Confused, Mark asked the conductor, who stared blankly and slapped his ticket. "All aboard for Oldwick," he said. When Mark disembarked at his apparent destination, the platform was bustling, but the schedule board listed no trains stopping there after dusk. Maintenance crews later confirmed the rails were decommissioned decades earlier. Mark's ride remains unexplained, leading him to wonder if he accidentally hopped into a parallel timeline's commuter system. Think you remember every Sinbad movie? Think again. Ask anyone born in the late 80s if they saw Shazam, the 1990s comedy where Sinbad plays a genie granting hilarious wishes, and 9 out of 10 people will swear it's real. I've seen this movie. They recall promotional tie-in toys, VHS covers with Sinbad's face, even commercials with that unforgettable theme song. Yet no studio records exist. No scripts, no posters in Viacom or 20th Century Archives. Sinbad himself has denied starring in any such film, and no footage has ever surfaced. This Mandela effect anomaly suggests millions briefly flit into a universe where Sinbad's genie movie actually existed, only to return claiming it never was. How did a single letter disappear from every bottle of Febreze overnight? For years, people swore they bought Febreze, an air freshener spelled Febreze. Then one day, retailers everywhere stocked Febreze, with just one E before the Z. Complaints flooded consumer forums. They changed the name without telling us. Yet corporate archives show it's always been Febreze with one E before the Z. Even longtime employees admit they remember the extra E. Was this a simple rebranding, or did millions of shoppers briefly slip into a parallel market where that second E never existed? What if a dream could order your real-world actions? College student Priya dreamed 3 nights in a row of her roommate Sarah handing her an envelope at 3:33 a.m., urging her to open it right away. The very next night at 3:33 a.m., Priya awoke to find a delivery slip tucked under her door. On impulse, she retrieved the package from the lobby. Inside was a sealed envelope labeled "Open at 3:33 tomorrow." Heart pounding, Priya obeyed and found a letter from Sarah warning Priya not to take a certain bus trip, citing a recent accident in the news. What was odd was that the next day, Priya had a trip planned on this exact bus, and in a dark twist of fate, that day and that exact ride Priya had booked did crash minutes after leaving. Priya swears she dream-walked into information from a timeline where she'd heeded Sarah's warning days earlier. Have you ever looked at a building and seen something that couldn't belong there? Photographer Theo was snapping long exposure shots of downtown Chicago's skyline. He took 2 identical frames 10 seconds apart. Reviewing them later, he noticed in the first photo a gleaming glass tower that stood adjacent to the Sears Tower. In the second photo, same angle, same time, the tower was gone. When Theo rushed outside, the block looked unchanged. No extra skyscraper, no construction site. Neighbors had no memory of anything ever existing there. Records confirmed the plot was empty for decades. Theo insists his camera glimpsed a structure from another reality and that his lens just happened to catch its brief crossover. What if your doppelganger lives a life eerily parallel to yours, just miles away? In 2011, British IT consultant David Clark Googled his own name and found another David Clark living in Manchester with the same birthday, same middle name, and even the same job title at a rival tech firm. Intrigued, he reached out and discovered the other David had the same childhood nickname, had traveled to the same backpacking hostel in Thailand in 2005, and even shared a rare allergy to kiwi. Yet neither man had ever met or even knew of each other until that Google search. DNA testing confirmed that they weren't related. "It's looking like a mirror image of my life," David said. Was this an improbable coincidence, or did two parallel streams of Earth diverge, spawning twin lives in different locales? Have you ever walked into a library and checked out a book that shouldn't really exist? Librarian Maria Perez was reorganizing a decades-old archive when she stumbled on a title called The Eighth Sign of the Zodiac, published in 1978 by a local press. Curious, she tried to locate any record of the publisher or the author. Nothing. No ISBN, no reviews, no library listings anywhere else in the country. Even the author's name, Thomas Adler, turned up 0 hits. Maria flipped through the manuscript. It contained references to cultural phenomena that didn't exist until the 1990s, and when pressed, her library's old accession logs showed the book being cataloged in 1980, 2 years before anyone invented the ideas in its pages. Maria suspects the book slipped in from another timeline where those cultural milestones happened early. Could a single subway stop be the gateway to another world? New York City bus driver Ricardo Luna always ended his shift at the 23rd Street Depot. One night he took a shortcut through the subway tunnel and noticed a dimly lit station sign that read 23rd Street, but the platform looked brand new, with shiny white tile and digital display boards. Ricardo walked through expecting to find the main concourse, but emerged instead onto an entirely unfamiliar street corner. Phone maps showed him near 57th Street. Panicked, he retraced his steps only to arrive back at the usual, worn-out 23rd Street exit. The renovated station had vanished. Ricardo insists he stepped into a parallel version of the subway, if only for a minute.